I want to share something with you that still embarrasses me a little, even now. For probably the first 20 years of growing food, I grew peas. And I did it exactly as the seed packet instructed. You know the routine. You take your little wooden stake, you make a nice straight furrow about an inch deep, and you drop those wrinkled little seeds in there, one by one, 2 inches apart, in a single tidy row. Then you cover them up, water them in, and wait. And in the back of your mind you're thinking, this is how Grandpa did it. This is what the extension bulletin says. This must be the right way. And I'll be honest, by late May, sometimes early June, depending on the year, I'd be out there hunched over on my hands and knees, mosquitoes biting the back of my neck, the sun already hot by 9 in the morning, my back screaming at me. I'd be picking peas one at a time off these scraggly little vines that never quite filled out the way the picture on the seed packet promised. The pods were thin, the vines flopped, and half of them had powdery mildew by the 4th of July. Then I'd rip the whole row out, feeling like I'd wasted 3 months of garden space. And you know what I'd get from a row that long? Maybe 8 to 10 pounds of shelled peas, if I was lucky. From a whole row. And I just thought that was how peas were. I figured, well, that's the price of fresh peas. That's just gardening. Maybe you felt that too. Maybe you're standing in your garden right now, looking at a sad little row of pea vines, wondering what you're doing wrong. Here's the thing. I wasn't doing anything wrong by the book. The book was wrong. A few summers back, I was up in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, visiting some folks I'd gotten to know over the years. If you've never driven those back roads in late spring, picture rolling green hills, white farmhouses with no power lines running to them, gardens that looked like they were laid out with a draftsman's ruler, and the occasional clip-clop of a horse and buggy coming around the bend. I was there partly for a livestock auction and partly just to visit, and I stopped by the home of a woman named Sarah. Sarah's got 9 kids still living at home, 2 of them in diapers, and her garden plot can't be more than 30 by 40 feet total. That's it. That's what's feeding 11 people through summer and into the canning season. I was walking around her garden with her, and we got to her pea patch, and I literally stopped in my tracks. What I was looking at wasn't a row, it was a wall, a solid green wall of pea vines about 4 feet tall, climbing up this beautiful twig and twine trellis her husband Eli had built. The whole thing was maybe 2 feet wide and 8 feet long. The vines were so thick I couldn't see through them, and dripping off them, I mean dripping, were pea pods. Fat, glossy, double and triple stacked pea pods. I said something kind of stupid like, "Sarah, how many plants do you have crammed in there?" And she just smiled and said, "Oh, probably 150 or so in about 2 square feet of soil at the base." I'll tell you the truth, I didn't believe her. I thought she was either pulling my leg or she was off by a factor of 10. Everything I'd ever read said peas need spacing, peas need air circulation, peas will choke each other out if you crowd them. About 3 weeks after I got home, a neighbor of theirs who keeps a phone for emergencies sent me some photos through her son. Sarah had weighed her harvest from that little patch, 153 pounds of pea pods over the season. 153 pounds, she counted, from 2 square feet of soil at the base of that trellis. Today, I'm going to walk you through exactly how the Amish grow peas this way, step by step, so you can start doing this in your own backyard this season. And stick around to the end, because I'll share a technique I picked up from Sarah's mother-in-law, a woman who must have been in her late 70s, that doubles the producing life of your pea vines well into the hot weather, when everybody else's are already dead and brown. I haven't seen this mentioned in a single gardening book. Now, let me be straight with you. I'm not some city kid who just discovered peas exist. I've been growing food for about 28 years. I've read Mel Bartholomew front to back. I've worked through Eliot Coleman's books more times than I can count. I've got a stack of extension bulletins from 3 different state universities sitting on my workbench right now. I've tried intensive spacing. I've tried wide rows. I've tried the cattle panel trellis, the netting, the cedar teepees, all of it. But what I realized, spending time around the families in Lancaster County and later in Holmes County, Ohio, and a couple of the smaller settlements out in northern Indiana, is that I'd been thinking about peas completely backward. I'd been treating them like individuals competing for resources. The Amish treat them like a community sharing resources. That shift changed everything for me, and it didn't require buying a single product. There's a word the Amish use, and you'll hear it especially among the Old Order communities. The word is Gelassenheit. It's a German word, Pennsylvania Dutch really, and it roughly translates to yieldedness, or letting be, or surrendering yourself to something larger than your own ideas. In their faith, it means submitting to God and to the community. But Sarah explained it to me in a garden context, and it stuck with me. She said, "You English want to control every plant. We let them do what they want to do together. When you've got 9, 10, 11 people at the dinner table and no grocery store to fall back on, you don't have time to coddle every individual seedling. You set the conditions right, you trust the seed, and you let the patch become what it wants to become." And here's where the science backs them up completely. There's research out of Cornell going back to the 1980s on what they call the legume-root intercommunication effect. When you plant peas at high density, their root systems actually share nitrogen-fixing bacteria, those rhizobia nodules, more efficiently than spaced-out plants do. The plants signal each other through root chemistry. A dense planting of peas isn't competing, it's cooperating. The Amish figured this out generations ago through pure observation. The science just caught up. So, let's get into it. Step 1 is the soil prep. And this is where you have to start in the fall, before the year you want to plant. I know. That's not what you wanted to hear if it's already March. But hear me out, because if you're starting now, you can still do a modified version. What Sarah does, and what I watched her husband Eli do at the end of the previous season, is they pile up a bed about 8 inches high, 2 feet wide, and however long they want the row. Right where the pea trellis will go, into that bed, they layer 1/3 aged horse manure, at least a year old so it's not hot, 1/3 finished compost from their kitchen and barn, and 1/3 native topsoil from the garden. They don't mix it, they layer it. The worms do the mixing over winter. By the time the ground thaws in spring, you've got the most beautiful, fluffy, biologically active soil you've ever stuck your hand into. If you're in zones 3 or 4, up in the upper Midwest or northern New England, you build this bed in October. Zones 5 through 7, you've got until early November. Zones 8 and 9, honestly, you can build it as late as December and still get the benefit of winter weathering. Step 2 is the planting pattern, and this is where it really gets interesting. I want you to forget everything you know about pea spacing. Sarah plants her peas in what she calls a band, not a row. She marks out a strip 2 inches wide on either side of where her trellis will go. So you've got essentially a 4-inch wide planting zone with the trellis running right down the middle. Then she pushes peas into the soil 2 inches apart in every direction on a grid. 2 inches apart sideways, 2 inches apart front to back in that 4-inch wide band. So, in a single foot of trellis length, you're planting somewhere between 30 and 36 pea seeds. In an 8-foot trellis, that's well over 250 seeds going in. Sounds insane, right? It's not. Remember the cooperation effect. They want to be that close. Plant about 1.5 inches deep. Use a soaked seed if you can, 12 hours in lukewarm water with a pinch of inoculant powder, which is just a commercial preparation of those rhizobia bacteria we talked about. You can buy a little bag for a couple of bucks at any decent garden store, and one bag will last you years. For zones 3 and 4, you're planting these as soon as you can work the ground in April. Zones 5 through 7, late March to early April. Zones 8 and 9, you're actually doing a fall planting in October for a winter crop, which is a whole other conversation. Step 3 is the trellis itself, and this is where 90% of gardeners, including past me, get it wrong. We build trellises that are too short and too flimsy. Eli's trellis is 5 feet tall, and it's built like a fence post, sunk a foot into the ground with cross bracing. The climbing structure itself is just untreated jute twine and small twigs from their woodlot, woven into a grid with about 4-inch openings. Why does height matter? Because densely planted peas grow taller. There's a study out of Oregon State that looked at vine length in relation to planting density. Densely planted peas grew on average 40% taller than spaced-out peas because they were reaching for light cooperatively. If your trellis is only 3 feet tall, you're cutting your yield in half right there. Build it 5 feet. Build it 6 if you can. You will fill it. Step 4 is variety selection, and this matters more than people realize. Sarah grows almost exclusively a tall heirloom shelling pea called tall telephone, sometimes sold as alderman. She also grows a smaller amount of a sugar snap variety called Cascadia. The tall telephone vines will go 6 feet if you let them. They're an old variety dating back to the 1880s, and they were specifically bred for the kind of intensive cottage gardening that the Amish are essentially still doing. The modern dwarf and bush varieties you see in most seed catalogues were bred for mechanical harvesting on commercial farms. They're not built for this method. If you can't find tall telephone, look for Lincoln or Green Arrow, or an old variety called Champion of England. Any tall heirloom vining pea will work. Just stay away from the bush types. They'll sulk in dense planting. If you're finding value in learning how the Amish approach peas, hit subscribe. I've got a lot more of these coming. Step 5 is mulching and watering, and this is non-negotiable in this method. Because you've got so many plants in such a small footprint, the soil moisture demand is high. As soon as your peas are about 3 inches tall, you're going to mulch the base of the band with about 3 inches of clean straw. Not hay, straw. Hay has seeds in it, and you'll be pulling weeds all summer. Straw. You can usually get a bale at any farm store for under $10, and it'll do this and a couple other beds. The mulch keeps the soil cool, which peas absolutely require, and it holds moisture. You're going to water deeply, soaking the bed all the way down, twice a week in normal weather, every other day in a hot stretch. Sarah uses a watering can with a rose nozzle, but a soaker hose under the mulch works beautifully too. Step 6 is succession and support during the growing season. As the vines climb, and they will climb fast once they get going, you may need to gently tuck the early growers back into the trellis. Sarah does this every couple of mornings while she's already out collecting eggs. Takes her maybe 2 minutes. She's also pinching off any vines that try to climb sideways onto neighboring plants instead of going up. You want everything going vertical. I started doing this method 4 years ago in my own garden in Zone 6. My pea harvest from a single 8-foot trellis went from about 12 pounds in a good year using the old row method to right at 98 pounds the first year I tried it the Amish way. Last year I hit 117. I'm not at Sarah's 150 yet, but I'm gaining on her. Let me share some patterns I've noticed in conventional pea growing and how this Amish approach handles things differently. I did most of these myself for years, so no judgment here. First pattern. Most folks plant peas way too sparsely because every seed packet and every gardening book tells them peas need air circulation to prevent disease. It feels logical. More space, more airflow, less mildew, right? But what actually happens is your sparse vines flop over because they have nothing to hold on to. They sprawl onto the soil, where they get splashed with dirt every time it rains. And that splashed soil is where powdery mildew lives. Dense planting on a tall trellis lifts every vine up off the ground and into moving air. There's a study out of the University of Wisconsin showing that vertically trellised peas had 70% less foliar disease than sprawled peas, regardless of spacing. Second pattern, people wait too long to plant. Folks see the recommended date on the packet and they wait until it's comfortable to be outside in shorts. By then, your soil is already warming past pea-friendly temperatures. Peas germinate best between 40 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit soil temperature, and they actually do beautifully germinating right around 45 degrees Fahrenheit. Sarah plants hers when the snow melts off the bed and she can push a finger into the soil. That's it. The Amish don't wait for comfortable, they plant when the plant wants to be planted. Third pattern, people over-fertilize, especially with nitrogen. They see scrawny vines and they think, well, let me throw some Miracle-Gro on there. Peas are a legume. They make their own nitrogen through those root nodules we talked about. If you give them extra nitrogen, you get a beautiful jungle of leaves and almost no pods. The plant has no incentive to flower because it's swimming in nutrients. The Amish bed is rich in compost and aged manure, but it's balanced. The peas have to work a little, which is what makes them produce. Fourth pattern. People rip the vines out the moment they slow down in late June or early July. They assume the plant is done. Often it's not done, it's just stressed by heat. Which brings me to the secret I promised you. Here's something I picked up from Sarah's mother-in-law, an Amish grandmother named Anna. Must have been in her late 70s. Tiny woman with hands like leather from a lifetime of work. Kerchief tied tight under her chin. She was sitting on the porch shelling peas when I first met her, and we got to talking. I'd been complaining, in a respectful way, that my pea season was so short. Anna just shook her head and smiled, and she told me about a thing she does that I have never, and I mean never, seen mentioned in any gardening guide or extension bulletin. Once a week, starting the moment her peas begin to flower, Anna takes a 5-gallon bucket of cold well water, and she pours it slowly all the way along the base of the pea trellis. In the late evening, after the sun is off the bed, around 8 or so. That's it. Cold water, evening, once a week. It takes her about 30 seconds. She calls it giving them their evening tea. I remember thinking, that can't possibly do anything. It sounds almost too simple to work. Here's what's actually happening. There's research out of the University of Florida Horticulture Department on what's called root zone temperature buffering in cool season crops. Peas start to shut down pod production when their root zone temperature climbs above about 72 degrees Fahrenheit. A deep evening soak with cold water drops the soil temperature in the root zone by as much as 8 to 10 degrees, and it holds that lower temperature through the cool of the night and into the next morning. You're essentially tricking the plant into thinking it's still spring. You're extending the cool soil window by weeks. I started doing this 3 summers ago. My pea vines now produce well into mid-July in Zone 6, which is just unheard of. Last year, I was still pulling pods on July 18th, when most of my neighbours had ripped their peas out a month earlier. That's an extra 3 to 4 weeks of harvest from a 32-second-a-week chore. The Amish don't have a secret pea variety. They don't have a magic fertilizer. What they have is a philosophy. Set the conditions right. Plant generously. Trust the plants to cooperate the way nature designed them to. And tend them with patience.
40 pounds. 100 pounds.
150 pounds of peas from a tiny patch isn't a gimmick. It's what happens when you stop fighting the plant and start thinking like a community of roots. If you've tried this method or something similar, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear what varieties are working for you, what zone you're in, what kind of results you're getting. And if you're brand new to this, start with the smallest possible version. A single 4-foot trellis, 2 square feet of bed, 100 seeds of tall telephone. Build it right, let it sit a season, and watch what happens. You will be amazed. Hit subscribe if you want more of these deep dives into how traditional cultures approach the garden. Thanks for spending time with me today. I'll see you in the next one.